Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. Since the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, Russia has lost nearly 30,000 soldiers, including around 200 in the last 24 hours alone, according to the Ukrainian army. In the last 24 hours, Russians tried to carry out assault operations in 5 directions, including towards Donetsk and Luhansk, but without success. Ukrainian forces repelled 16 attacks by the occupying Russian forces. During the last 24 hours, the Russians fired on Kharkiv again, and the missile hit the Institute of Endocrine Pathology. In Donbass, Severodonetsk suffered the greatest bombardment. In Severodonetsk, the Russians are destroying the remains of the waterworks and other infrastructure, and are continuing to fire at the hospital, where there are still doctors. The enemy concentrated all its strength to take the city and cut the Lysychansk-Bakhmut road. Their goal is to completely prevent the evacuation of people and the delivery of humanitarian aid. Russia has announced that it is using a new generation of laser weapons in Ukraine. First of all, you need to pay attention to the fact that the Russians need to save on missiles and need to explain it somehow. In the propaganda of Nazi Germany, the term Wunderwaffe was coined at the time. The more it became clear that Germany had no chance, the more the propaganda spoke of a wonder weapon that would be so powerful it would become a turning point in the war. So, if the Russians try to talk about a miracle weapon already in the 3rd month of the invasion, it proves the complete failure of their invasion. The International Committee of the Red Cross started the registration of prisoners of war deported by the Russians from the Azovstal plant in Mariupol. Ukrainian soldiers provide their personal data and the name of the closest family member. This information is intended to help find captured soldiers and contact the family. On the other hand, the city of Mariupol itself is threatened with a humanitarian catastrophe. There is not enough food in the city, no drinking water, no electricity. There is also no medicine. There is a risk of cholera, dysentery, or other infectious diseases spreading. There was a threat of complete destruction of life in the Sea of Azov. The bombing of the Azovstal damaged the installation containing tens of thousands of tons of concentrated hydrogen sulfide solution. A leakage of this liquid will completely kill the flora and fauna of the Sea of Azov. If hazardous substances leak, they could then end up in the Black and Mediterranean seas. Since the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, Russia has already lost 28,500 soldiers, over 3,000 armed combat vehicles, over 1,250 tanks, and 203 aircraft. In the United States, a biographical comic devoted to President of Ukraine was published, entitled Political Power, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Previously, Tidal Wave Comics published biographies of Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Condoleezza Rice, George Bush, Justin Trudeau, Nelson Mandela, and other leaders. G7 finance ministers met today in Germany to discuss the economic consequences of the war in Ukraine and further support for the country. Meanwhile, representatives of the United States and Turkish governments are discussing the accession of Sweden and Finland to NATO, something which Turkey has said it will veto. Today, in Königswarter, Germany, the 2-day G7 summit began, attended by finance ministers from the group of the 7 most economically important countries in the world. The main topics of the meeting are the effects of the war in Ukraine and the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. The topic of the war in Ukraine will be at the centre of this meeting. This unprovoked criminal attack by Russia poses an additional threat to the development of the world economy. We are talking about inflation, but we are also facing difficulties after recovering from the pandemic. Putin will not achieve his war goals in Ukraine, but there is one thing he has already achieved: international cooperation. It is better than ever. The member states of the European Union are showing solidarity with the Ukrainian authorities and providing support. Today in the Bundestag, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that the European Union must make concrete preparations for the reconstruction of Ukraine by creating a fund that will help cover the billions in rebuilding costs of the destroyed country. Helping a brutally attacked country is not an escalation of the war, but a defence aid, and ending the violence as soon as possible. Putin still believes he can use bombs to make his way to peace, but he is wrong. He was also wrong about the determination of the Ukrainians and the unity of our allies. There will be no forced peace because the Ukrainians will not accept it, and neither will we. One of the most important topics on the international agenda is the entry of Sweden and Finland to NATO, and the announcement of a Turkish veto. The United States is in advanced negotiations with Ankara on this matter. There was also discussion today by the US President Joe Biden, Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson, and Finnish President Sauli Niinisto. As Mateusz Morawiecki announced during the conference of the Polish Institute of International Affairs Strategic Arc, in the event of a threat to Sweden and Finland during the process of their accession to NATO, Poland will come to their aid. The Prime Minister also added that permanent NATO bases should be established on NATO's eastern flank, and Poland is ready to build them. International institutions face major challenges aimed at bringing the war to an end, shortening cooperation with Russia to a minimum and helping Ukraine. The European Commission yesterday unveiled a plan to end Europe's dependence on Russian fossil fuels by 2027. The investment has an estimated value of €300 billion. Earlier today, President Andrzej Duda and Minister of National Defence Mateusz Morawiecki watched the Defender Europe 2022 manoeuvres in the Podlasia region of Poland. This is an international cyclical military exercise organised by the United States Armed Forces, the purpose of which is to build readiness and interoperability between the United States and NATO allies and partners. The exercises in 9 countries will run until the 27th of May. Apart from Poles and Americans, French, Swedish, German, Danish and British forces are taking part in the manoeuvres. Cooperation of the soldiers is practiced here. It is a part of the great exercises that are taking place in our part of Europe, on the eastern flank of the North Atlantic Alliance, the Defender Europe 2022 exercises, in which 20,000 soldiers from 8 countries of the North Atlantic Alliance take part, including Sweden, which I hope will soon also become a member state. We all see the situation in Ukraine. We are all aware of the potential threat as well. This exercise, which, by the way, is an exercise planned much earlier, is to demonstrate the cooperation and efficiency of the North Atlantic Alliance forces in collective defence. Allied forces build interoperability and cooperate with each other. The soldiers of the Polish army are constantly improving their skills, thus strengthening the security of both Poland and the entire eastern flank of NATO.
Train together, you may make mistakes together, you succeed together, and you build confidence in each other's capacities. That's incredibly important in warfare. We want the Americans and the Poles and other Europeans to share in and join in this crisis. This problem in Ukraine, it's not just a Polish problem. It's an international problem, and it's important that others, like the Americans, are here to share in and join in this crisis. Just that we're ready. We have great confidence in the Polish military. We've been training with them for 30 years. We're proud of them.
One of the goals of this exercise is to move smoothly, to move long distances. The task of the soldiers of the Territorial Defence Forces is, inter alia, to ensure freedom of manoeuvre for operational forces and allied forces. We operate on our own territory, in our own permanent area of responsibility. In other words, in the places we come from, which we know not only geographically, but also socially. That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, Poland Daily Business, and more programmes. But from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.